So, welcome everybody. Here we are at eChannelNews again with the 2024, review and 2025 predictions. And I've got my friend Rob Rae from Beyond Pax8, I believe, the event itself, but it's of course from Pax8. And we're going to talk about what's going on, what happened in 2024. Rob, man, how's it going?
Excellent. How are you doing, Julian?
Very, very good. So, man, 2024. I mean, we're almost at the end of it. What's your take? Like, was it exactly what you expected at the end of the year?
Hmm. Uh, was it exactly what I expected? I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna say yes, and not by any means am I like the smartest guy and knew all this was gonna happen. I'm very positive. I'm always looking for the silver lining in everything, right? Because there always is a silver lining, and deep down I'm a really negative person that tends to default to the horrible. So if I force myself to think about the positive every time something is asked, then I can stay out of that dark place. So for me, it's like I went into 2024 with very, very high expectations, and I think those expectations were met. And I think that there's a lot of things that we can see throughout the channel that happened that kind of back that up. So I'm going to say that 24 was a wonderful year, and I think it was pretty much what I expected. But again, that's a lot because of a positive attitude.
Well, there's always ups and downs, tailwinds, headwinds,
Mhm.
however you want to do them. What was some of the things that what was there anything that surprised you the most in 2024? People talk a lot about AI, of course. They talk
Yeah,
about
I mean
all these
AI's.
things.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different things, and we can talk about AI. I think there's two things, like kind of like well, let's bucket them into three different things. In There's cybersecurity. We've been talking about cybersecurity
Oh
forever,
yeah.
and all these things have a tendency to come and tie together. And AI and cybersecurity and compliance are going to do all those things. But I think that we saw, there's less conversations about the need for cybersecurity and more about what the outcome from it should be. Meaning that, and we see this with everything, especially when we're in the MSP space and working with small business owners, small, medium business end users, the adoption rate is always slower than it is on the enterprise side. Way
Mm.
slower, always
Yeah.
is. So, what we're seeing is, and the initial resistance is it's not going to happen to me, it's too expensive, all the usual stuff that we would see years ago. A lot of those things are gone, and a
Mm.
lot of those arguments are gone. And now we actually are starting to see some very intelligent planning and organizing and budgeting towards
Mm.
cybersecurity in the SMB space with the MSP. So I think that was an immensely positive thing that surprised me that it's coming along quite quickly. And I think compliance goes along with that as well. We still have issues in the mid market where we can have conversations with end users about compliance and they're not necessarily buying into it, especially in the small business side. But, those conversations I think are getting stronger and better as well. I'm As far as like AI goes, I think that the technology and what it can do and the application of it and how we understand it today versus even just 6 months ago is
Mm.
incredibly high. We still haven't figured out a way to make money. We still haven't figured out a way to commoditize this, which was, I keep saying that's the key to AI being successful
Mm.
is we need to figure out a way to make money at it. Otherwise, it could be as awesome as it is, but we have to find a way to make it valuable for our businesses to have that conversation and sell it and support it and all those things. I don't think we're quite there yet, but just the speed of that technology and even the speed of our comprehension of that technology and what it can do. There's still a massive journey here, but I think it was one of my surprises for 2024 for sure.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, funny enough, when we talk about folks, all the AI gods and so on, and we're actually starting to see MSPs it's seeping into the channel that they're starting to leverage this to reduce costs,
Yes.
save time, do better, monitor those contracts a little better. So we actually seeing the benefits seeping in to the channel. And I think the challenge is for MSPs, and let me know what you think about this. Yeah, AI is like dominating the airwaves, right? It's sucking the wind, out of the sail type of the room. And one of the things they're trying to do is like when their customer says, "What do I do with
Mhm.
AI?" Right? I think maybe the MSPs are not quite sure how to answer that question.
Hmm.
If you were to put your MSP hat on, knowing those MSPs, what should they do? Should they say, "Hey, still early days yet. We don't know. Here's what we think." How should they have a conversation about AI with their customers?
So I think it's important for the MSP to be the expert in the room, right? We
Mm,
need to be the experts in the room. So I would suggest that any MSP that is struggling with that conversation really start immersing yourself into the world of AI. And I mean, it can go into many, many different directions, but the applications in the SMB space and how it relates to SMB, there's some really interesting content in there within our own space, within the MSPs, as far as what different organizations are doing with AI, and that can be the vendors that you're actually working with. But there's a lot of focus around that. I think specific where the MSP can add a ton of value to an SMB. Specifically is what are those individual roles of those people that are asking those questions? Like, is it a finance role? Is it a sales role? Is it marketing? Like, and then start applying what AI or what tools you've seen out there, even if it's anecdotal. Even if it's just a story to say, yeah, I heard this story about how AI is repurposing PowerPoint decks these days, so you don't have
mm,
to write your own kind of stuff, or things like that. So I think first of all, being a subject matter expert, I think is going to be critical to the success of the managed service provider to make sure that we are relevant and that your end users continue to come to you as the single source of truth rather than listening the news or read what's happening on social media because there's a lot of garbage out there, very
mm,
similar to everything else that we've evolved from,
mm,
starting from the cloud. There was a lot of garbage about what the cloud actually was at the
mm.
beginning, and then cybersecurity, of course, and ransomware and all that. So I think being that single source of truth, being that individual that knows more about it than anyone else in the room, which is not that hard these days, I
Mm.
think is going to be a superpower of the MSP heading forward.
That's a really good point, Rob. It's like at the end of the day, right? These MSPs, they have to get ahead of the curve,
Mhm.
and not just wait. I don't think it's a wait and see game. They need to like dig in right now, put a stake in the ground, figure out what's going on, because the more they know, the better they can digest it, and be able to like articulate it better to their clients. Because everybody's asking this question at the end customer level, and simple things is like Chat GBT. What do I do? Do I upload my information? They need to understand first. Let's put some guardrails
Yes.
from a cybersecurity angle. We all know that that's a bit of a problem. When we'll get back to AI because it says one of those things that, again, as I said, it sucks the air out of the room. But when you sit down with these folks, these MSPs, what are they telling you are their biggest challenges?
It's traditional. It's the same traditional challenges that we've been dealing with for years. It's
Same.
scalability of their business. So here's the great part about everything in the managed services space is that pretty much everybody is growing.
Yeah.
And there's some data reports that came out yesterday from Canalys. I know you mentioned that I think you recently sat down with Jay McBain. Canalys has got some phenomenal data that they just released yesterday saying that both PSAs and RMMs both grew in 2024. And by a sizable amount, like double-digit percentage growth. RMM and PSA technology has been around in the managed services space for 15 years and pretty much the cornerstone of every managed service provider. This business, this new RMM and PSA business is not it's not transitioning like from one PSA to another PSA. Like it's a tool that's designed for managed service providers. So this is new business that's coming in the door. Where is this new business coming from? That means there's more managed service providers than ever before. And in my mind, that's a great indication that this is, finally, we're seeing growth in the managed services, like managed service providers, because there's a demand from SMB end users. So we're seeing a growth in managed service, the number of managed service providers globally. We're seeing demand for technology that managed service providers typically will use. Yet, when I talk to every MSP, they're all still growing. They're all still finding more end users. So, we're in a great spot right now where, yes, we have more competition than ever before, but there's also more business than ever before. And, we've been talking for years about co-managed IT and how MSPs are also starting to head up market. More and more medium-sized businesses are starting to outsource or outsource portions of IT to
Mm.
managed services. I think that's also been a significant trend that we saw in 2024, where that just continues to be a thing. It's no longer this, concept that we're talking about or the future. It's like everybody's doing it and everybody's benefiting from it. So, long story short, When I'm having these conversations with MSPs, it's all about scalability, and the challenges of scalability is how do we grow our businesses? How do we make sure we're supporting all of these customers and the demands that are coming from these customers? The challenge comes is that, and we ran into this pre-pandemic where there was a shortage of talent, a shortage
Mm,
of technical talent. But now you're starting to see automation within the actual MSP shops where they're starting to automate the way in which they do their businesses. You look at technologies like RPAs, right?
mm,
Organizations like Roost is a great example of this, where now we can actually streamline more technical support where you don't necessarily have to go and hire a boatload of T1s. You can
mm,
actually do this through technology and have T1s acting and answering questions like T2s as a result. So, we're even starting to see some improvement leveraging AI technology and those types of technologies within the MSPs themselves. So, there is it's to back to your original questions, like what is their biggest challenge? It continues to be sales and marketing if they want to grow their businesses. It
mm,
continues to be scalability if they are growing. So that's uh,
mm,
it's the traditional challenges. I think the technology part of what we do, as much as it's painful that we have to learn something new every day, every month, every year, like we weren't talking about AI as much as we are now 2 years ago. We're still talking about cybersecurity and compliance that we have been for almost 10 years now. So it's this ongoing learning thing. I think for us, that's the easy part. The
mm.
harder part is the more business functions of growing your actual businesses.
So you think the talent issue is sort of like no longer a hot topic now? Because we still hear a lot of MSPs struggling to find the right talent. We hear
Yep.
about a lot of about that. So talent problem or not a problem?
No, it's definitely a problem. It's always going
Mm,
to be a problem. And especially in the managed services space, and us vendors that support the MSP space
mm,
struggle with the same thing. When you've got, intelligent kids that are coming out of school and are ready to enter the workforce, and they're getting, a plethora of jobs in the enterprise space or with, fancy companies that everybody's heard of, it's hard to compete for that talent, right?
mm,
Especially because we don't have the budgets that a lot of those organizations do. It's not nearly as sexy. A lot of our businesses are very local, so it's really hard to find that and really lean into that actual talent, which is why technology will help fill those gaps. Definitely the talent problem is there. CompTIA did a phenomenal report earlier in 2024 about the state of work in managed services.
mm,
And it's quite interesting because, our biggest challenge up until this point was trying to attract people to jobs in IT, where it was like, I don't understand it. Coding is hard. I'm not a nerd, those kinds of things. And trying to attract people to our space has been incredibly difficult because it's intimidating. Well, that's not the case anymore. If you think about just our children and even our children's children, they're not intimidated by technology. You
mm,
you hand a baby an iPad, they're going to figure it out in a couple of minutes. They're not intimidated by it anymore. So what's happening is these kids are actually growing up with technology around them and they're interested in technology jobs.
mm,
The challenge is they don't care how it works. And
mm,
that is the big thing that all of us have kind of like in this space. If you talk to a lot of these MSPs that are kind of the age that you and I are, Julian, you talk about the original journey, it's because they were building MSP or
mm,
building computers back in the day, like white boxes and stuff like that. But so they understand the functional usage and how everything kind of connects together when it comes to IT. These days, these kids are coming out without understanding any of how it actually works because it's all disposable. It's all easily replaceable. It's all locked down where you cannot go and change a video card or whatever the case may be, like we used to back in the day. And some could argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they're not intimidated by the technology, but the ability to troubleshoot and solve problems just isn't there because
mm.
it wasn't there from the very beginning, and that part of the job still intimidates them. This is where technology can actually solve those problems. But yeah, I think there's going to be and continue to be a significant problem with having that level of tech talent coming into the
Mm.
workforce.
It's kind of interesting talking about PSAs as a double back a little bit that I think for the first time in 30 years, Kaseya overtook the number one position, apparently, from ConnectWise. And there's new entrants like Hallo PSA and other ones that's really, really gaining a lot of ground. What's your take on what's going on? Because these traditional solutions have been out there now for decades, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
whether we agree to it or not, it's some low tech, but also old tech, all right? And
Yep.
new things are replacing them, interfaces, the way it looks and feels, and so on. And the next generation that's coming in to kind of tie that in there, they understand what new tech looks like. Um, do you think that these new PSAs like Hello PSA and those folks have a chance to go after the incumbents?
Absolutely, they do. And this is again another beautiful part of our industry. And
Mm,
if you take a look over, I'm a big believer that history repeats itself, right? So, going back over the way in which our industry is kind of like expands and retracts and expands and retracts, and the retraction is typically done through acquisitions, and the expansion is done through innovation. And what you're seeing is that you're seeing a lot of organizations that are starting to innovate some newer ideas for traditional things, right? And that creates an opportunity. And by the way, the MSPs are a perfect home for that because we're a little more open-minded when it comes to newer. I don't want to say unproven because I don't think that that's necessarily fair, but newer technologies that just aren't as widespread in use in this space. And I'll use Datto as an example because when I was started it with Datto, it was in the early days, and we were maybe 50, 60 employees when I joined the organization. And we were innovating that technology and trying to bring it into a very watered down backup market, but we
mm,
were able to do it and do it in the managed services space and continue to grow that. And people are willing to take a little bit more of a chance on that newer technology that seems innovative. But even if you take a look at Datto now, that was 2013. That technology is 11, 12 years old now.
mm,
And what was new then isn't new now. And it's not to say that there hasn't been any innovation. There definitely has been, and continued growth on these. But I think the demand for continuing to upgrade and continue to move the existing platforms forward. You think about it, Julian. If you wanted to start a business today, do you want to buy a 13-year-old, 14-year-old piece of technology that you need to continue to innovate? It's like
mm,
buying a 14-year-old car and continue to fix it. Or do you want a
mm,
brand new one where you don't have to worry about those things for a little while, but ultimately you will? And that's the debate that, is kind of going on. Um, the big guys, the legacy guys have done a phenomenal job. They are kind of the pillars of this managed services space. And, they are going to continue to be those pillars, whether it's, one's in the lead this month, one's in the lead next month. I
mm.
think we're going to continue to see that as they continue to try to innovate and try to figure out where we're going next. And that is, again, it's a beautiful part about our space because if we don't innovate and we don't
Mm.
continue
Sure.
to move that ball forward, you are going to get left behind. And we see this with technologies all the time.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the channel is definitely the early adopters and pretty much everything, right or wrong. The reality is that things are changing. And you know what I get a feel, Rob, these days is that it used to be where the hardware, we had to wait when the hardware had to catch up with the software because new software is coming out. Man, it's really slow. You got to change the hardware now to make it work type thing. It used to be where the software was ahead of the hardware. Recently, 2024, um, hardware took a quantum leap forward where the software is not even able to catch up with the AI enablement that these devices have. So the equipment, the hardware seems to be accelerating a little bit further, faster than the software is. So it seems like all the barriers we had before, limitations, are somehow dissipating.
Mhm.
Um, are you seeing that in the technology front?
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a debate that I had recently. Forgive me if we've shared this conversation. It was really interesting, and neither of us, like we're both channel chiefs in this industry, and we were having this conversation, and neither of us believe that this is necessarily true, but it's an interesting conversation. And I think Julian, I think I brought it up with you. I think you and I talked about it last time we were together in Whistler. The whole concept of is the cloud really the most viable piece or viable business model for the SMB?
Mm.
And, if you think about, and again, don't torch me for this. This is just conversation, thought-provoking conversation. But the whole idea is that, is all the value of what we expected out of the cloud from a pricing perspective? Well, it turns out the cloud's not much cheaper than it was being in legacy. Is it faster? Nah, it depends. It's debatable as to whether it's faster. We definitely see more outages, and you look at larger organizations, even like Microsoft, still have downtime, and it critically impacts businesses. Fortunately these days for very short periods of time, it's still a problem nonetheless. Is it more secure? It hasn't proven to be more secure. So, with all of these things about moving away from on-prem to cloud, like, has it really been a viable, better thing for the SMBs and for the MSP market? It's debatable, and there's a few MSPs out there that are having that debate and starting to think maybe things need to come back on-prem. And by no means am I suggesting that anybody do that, because I think it's going to be a balance, and it's exactly what you're talking about. And it's this ongoing race, man. We had this. Like, I remember one of my first jobs in IT was compact computers, and it was all about the chipset. What was the newest Intel chipset that was coming? We're going from 386s to 486s. We got to get those 486s. Well, they're on a boat coming over from Asia. They're not going to be here for another year, so we got to wait. But what are we going to do in the meantime? And then all of a sudden the 486 is in there, and now the hardware is moving too slow to keep up with the chipset. So, it's this ongoing thing that we just have in IT, and it's a beautiful thing, and in my mind keeps us gainfully employed.
Well, Robert, you're not wrong at all. I mean, the reality is it's still 85% of all the data is still, on-prem. And that's even in the enterprise level. So the reality is that cloud is big. Of course, it's growing like, really, really fast. But the reality is there's a lot of challenges, as we move forward. You know, on top of all that, I think the 800-pound gorilla in the room is that little word we hear a lot of, but not we don't pay attention to it. Sustainability. We know the amount of energy it takes to run these data centers, right? I mean, what's it? $800, 800 times more energy for a chat GPT search than a Google search. I mean, most people don't even want data centers in their states and provinces anymore, right?
Yeah.
There's just not enough electricity. But apparently, I heard this as well. I don't know how true it is that those data center folks are asking governments about nuclear stations to be able to generate their own energy. It's like, where are we headed, man? So, yeah, if you put all this stuff in the cloud, you got to have these data centers, and these data centers are sucking a lot of stuff. I believe the three or four key data centers now are having more carbon footprint than the airline industry. I don't know if these stats actually are true or not, so please do not hold me to it. But I hear these things and I go, could that be true? I mean, it sounds insane. What's your thought on the whole, like, picking up on a cloud thing, moving forward with sustainability issues, data centers? Is it sustainable? Forget if it's better, worse, or indifferent. Is it sustainable?
I don't know, and I'm not an expert in these things. Here's
Yeah.
here's my take on it, though. Um, so two different lines of thought here. If we're going to talk about it from a how do I position this and talk to my end users about this? Is it impacting my ability to make money?
Yeah.
Right? And I think the answer to that is no, for a couple of different reasons. A, there's really no other alternative at this particular point. Sure, you could make the argument that on-prem is maybe more sustainable, but there's no, in my, to my knowledge, there's nothing that an MSP has ready at their fingertips to be able to go to an end user and say, if you care about the environment, here's the more sustainable route of buying this technology and supporting this technology ongoing. So, I don't think there's anybody that's been specific enough or that I've seen that has had that conversation. I think when it comes to the money making part of this as well, Julian, part of the biggest issue is that we all love the idea of more green energy
Mm,
and better ways and more sustainable things for the planet. But at the end of the day, convenience and price still factor in specifically.
mm,
I'll give you a very specific example. I'm on a board. I'm on the board of directors for CompTIA, and we hired a Gen Z marketing company out of New York to come in and do a presentation about how to sell to Generation Z. Generation Z. And what happens is one of the individuals goes, "We care about the environment. You need to start thinking about the environment." So you start thinking, okay, I work for a marketplace. We have 135, 140 different products on our marketplace. Is there room for us to start thinking about carbon footprint for these organizations? Meaning, hey, I'm going to start buying, let's say, a new PSA tool, right? This conversation we already had earlier. Is the carbon footprint of that PSA company that's manufacturing this technology going to factor into my buying decision? And this Gen Z company was saying, absolutely, yes, it will. At which point, the guy that's doing the presentation, takes a sip out of his coffee, which is made with almond milk. And if you know anything about almond milk, as awesome as it might be, it is not environmentally sustainable compared to cow's milk because of the amount of water that almonds need in order to grow, right? It's come through that almond milk is not environmentally sustainable. So, I asked him specifically about this, and he's like, yeah, well, I really like almond milk. So like the whole argument about, sustainability and the importance of it in your buying decision just kind of went through, but I like almond milk better kind of conversation. So, in my mind, that's still something as humans we need to really understand and really kind of make those hard decisions. As far as the physical part of this, and again, not knowledgeable in this area at all, but what I do find is that humans have a tendency, when there's a problem, humans have a tendency to solve that problem. I think of us very much like ants. If part of our ecosystem is collapsed, we all get together and we all figure out how to fix that part of it because it helps all of us. And by no means am I saying we're doing it because we want to improve society. It's generally because we know how to make more money or it makes our lives even better. So, I think with this problem is more than likely temporary. I spent a lot of time recently in Reykjavik, in Iceland, where they're doing a lot of like that country is at 99% green energy. The
Mm.
only energy that they're consuming is still fuel-based cars, which I think they're actually banning next year. Their heating source, including the data centers that are out there, are actually coming from the ground, from geothermal. The heating and cooling is all kind of set in there. Do we see more of that? I know Ireland's investing quite a bit of that, specifically for data centers. So it's interesting. Where does it go? I don't know. Will we solve the problem? Yes. This goes back to the traditional anecdote of the horse poop problem in London. You're familiar with that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, turn of the century, the streets of London are filling with horse crap because there's so many horses and people can afford horses, and now everybody's riding a horse, and the horses poop in the streets, and they're trying to solve this problem. They spent millions and millions of dollars trying to engineer a poop problem. Meanwhile, 2, 3 years later, it was gone because the automobile was invented, and
Yeah.
then all this money and energy about trying to solve poop problems disappeared. It's the same thing, that we'll find with this
Mm.
particular problem. So.
Well, yeah, dot to be seen. It's a lot of challenges, but there are companies out there that I would suggest that company, MSPs look at. HP is one of those that is doing phenomenal in the
Mhm.
sustainability world, and there are things that everybody can do that actually mitigates this problem. I know hardware is getting better, consuming less energy. There's a lot of people and eyeballs on it. Quite frankly, I think they kind of already know what to do. The message is, is it affordable? Can they do it, in an economical way that for sustainability? And I think eventually they may not have a choice, but we'll see. Talking about the younger generation, as you had an example there, obviously, they're making up the majority of the buying decisions these days. Um, and the buying journey has sort of changed to a large degree as well. They don't meet people in person as much anymore. They don't they do a little bit of virtual, but their attention span is a little bit shorter with short content and so on. What's your take in how we should, as a technology organization, market get the attention of those folks?
25% of the workforce is going to be under 25 years old in 2025. Well, 25, 25, 25. So it's a challenge. It's a problem. These are things that we're going to have to think about. And, this generation, for a couple of different reasons, has grown up a little bit different, as did the millennials. And we all complained about the millennials 10, 15 years ago. Just like our parents, the boomers, complained about Gen Xers. We were lazy. We watched too much TV. We played too many video games, listened to too much rap music, that kind of stuff, and it was going to rot us and make us all just horrible human beings. But, we've turned out pretty damn good. Um, the millennials, if you take a look kind of that generation coming up, did we have to change the way in which we do things? Julian, I would argue that 15 years ago, if you and I were doing this interview right now, first of all, your background would be probably less color, less new, less, information. You'd probably be wearing a tie and a jacket, as would
Yeah.
I.
Mm,
I'm going to give the millennials credit for making work life a little bit easier, a little more fun to want to come to the work because that's what they demanded. And guess what? We all wrapped our arms around it and said, you know what? Damn right. I don't want to wear a suit to work virtually anymore,
mm,
that kind of stuff. So I love that, and Gen Zers, Gen Zers will do exactly the same thing. They're going to come in here and try to flip the table over and demand crazy things. At which point, then they will start getting married and start having children and start having mortgages, hopefully, and will then realize that that's not the way the world works, and they need to uh, actually
Apps.
contribute to society in order
Yeah.
to be able to improve and move. However, a lot of the things that they're actually doing, I have quite a few Gen Z staff that work for me now, and I'm actually amazed. As much as I want to, we kind of crap on the next generation that's coming along. I'm actually pretty amazed at how hard these kids work. They work really, really hard. They don't necessarily understand everything, but they're not afraid of it either. So, I'm very bullish on kind of this generation as much as they,
Mm.
grew up eating Tide Pods and all the crazy stuff that we talked about. That being said, the way they consume things and the way that which engage with other human beings has changed. And, each generation is a little bit different. They don't want to be going into big box stores and being sold something that's on site. They want to be able to go online and shop. They want to be able to feel like they're part of the decision-making process rather than just being told what it is. So when you think about technology, so, I mentioned this earlier before, and the idea that people are less, the next generation is less intimidated by technology than any other generation beforehand. So if they're less intimidated by it, they're probably more likely to think that their own research is going to be valid. Let's assume electrical, the being an electrician gets easier for some reason, right?
Mm.
It's not nearly as dangerous, those kinds of things. And then all of a sudden, everybody's like, you know what? I'm going to try wiring my own house. And, because there's enough YouTube videos out there, you could
Mm.
literally do those kinds of things. Should you? Hell no. But, there's a lot of people that actually will try to do it. And this generation is going to be no different when it comes to cybersecurity, compliance, AI, all these types of things. So, in order to create, for the MSP to continue and the vendors that support the MSPs to continue to work with this generation, we need to find ways to work with them and we need to go to where they are. We need to go with how they want to do things. And if they want research, give them research, but make sure it's in a place where they are coming there and it's research that you have done or you have provided or you have vetted through. If they want to buy technology, it's something that you have done, you have vetted, you have recommended, even though they are the ones that kind of did a little bit of research and said, where can I buy this? So, that's where the MSP role has changed. It's moving away from solution provider
Mm.
into more strategic advisor. And, good news is there's way more money in that. What's funny, Julian, about that? The whole idea, and I've mentioned this a few times, the whole idea of moving away from solution provider. I'm here for a solution. I'm ready to provide it when you need it, to strategic advisor, which is I'm going to give you advice, even though it might differ in what you know. That whole idea of moving from solution provider strategic advisor, what I did was I plugged into chat GPT, what is the future of managed services, and it literally told me moving away from solution provider to strategic advisor because of technology. It's literally AI that is feeding us the answer to the future
Mm.
of working with AI. How awesome is that?
It's pretty cool. The thing is, of course, with AI as well, is that it's getting data from people that's putting that type of information into the system. And so it's actually, in a way, you may think it's AI suggesting that, but it's probably a few hundred people that's actually pushed that information
Sure.
into AI that's serving it up. But
You don't want to speak too loud. You don't want the machines to hear you
they're
talking
already
really
doing
bad
it,
about
man.
them like that.
They already got me. The one cool thing, I mean, I'm extremely bullish on the younger generation. I live with them all the time, and I see the speed that they try something is alarming. It's it used to be when you would try something, but the usual bell curve, but you get the laggards and the early
Yep.
adopters and so on.
Yep.
I think that curve is narrowing a lot more now. Somebody should revise that in the marketing world. It's crunching. I think it's generational. I think that they're laggard, but for a very short period of time,
Yep.
and then boom, they adopt, and then the other ones who say, "Hey, you got it. I'm gonna jump on this," right? So the speed at which they adopt technology is faster and faster and faster. And I don't know what it is, but I think it has a lot to do with everybody now has a smartphone, and nobody wants to be left behind.
Yep.
And so if somebody's using it, they don't need to prove it anymore. It's like enough people are using it. I'm going to use it too. So the adoption rate is getting faster and faster, which sort of means from a marketing and sales perspective for MSPs and vendors is they've got to get their ducks in line when they look at the actual customers that they're trying to target, right? They need to get their information out there faster,
Yes.
better, more succinct, in better ways,
Yes.
less long versions, and et cetera, et cetera. Because it's not easy. It's very, very noisy. Just in the cybersecurity world alone, 6,000 vendors, rallying for position, top 20.
Yep.
And with the number one still owns maybe just 12% or so, market share.
Yep.
It's a bit of a challenge. Looking at the MSPs to wrap up the MSP part of the game. So their challenges are sales and marketing, scaling, maybe technology less, figuring out how to use AI. What advice would you give them looking out for 2025? What do you think they should be doubling down on moving forward?
All right, so there's a lot there. To close out the Gen Z conversation, I mean, I think it's important that, and I mentioned it before, and I think we got to keep this in mind, and we need to put aside the fact that we're right on the way things should be done.
Yeah.
Um, the whole idea of we need to go to where they are rather than try to bring them to where we are.
Um,
All right. And if you're open-minded with the idea that things are going to change and things are going to continue to change, and if you're open-minded to the idea that when we get through all of the crap, there's going to be some gold there. And I do think that and I mentioned it before, we learned this with the millennials. There's gold there to be had. Our lives, yours and mine, Julian, we're relatively the same age, has improved as a result of the millennial generation and the demands that they have on society and the way in which we work. I am 100% convinced of that, and I thank them for that. The Gen Zers will be no different, but we need to go to where they are. And in order for us to stay relevant, we need to also be open-minded to those types of things. We don't need to go all the way, but we do need to think about new and different ways to do that business. Now, back to the actual, kind of origin of the question here. So what are the kind of the things that we're looking at for 2025? And I kind of put a little bit of thought to this because you're going to get the usual answers. AI, sure, that's easy. Growth in cybersecurity, sure, that's easy. I wanted to go a little bit deeper and kind of come up with things that, not everybody is going to predict. So, there's kind of like a little bit of diversion. That doesn't mean that AI and cybersecurity and compliance aren't going to see significant growth patterns in 2025. They will. But it's just, I mean, I don't need to tell you something that you've already heard probably 100 times in the same, predictions. We could compile all of these into one and probably still only come out with 10 from 100 different people.
yeah.
So keep this in mind when I'm talking about these things. So one of the things that, I think that there's a massive opportunity for the channel for in 2025 is to actually lead the way on innovation technology. And let's think about AI as a specific example. So a lot, or generationally, if we look at new technology comes to market, it's generally very expensive. It's generally sold directly to enterprise businesses because they're the only ones that can afford it. When you look at the price of computers back when we were children, they were like $6,000 or $7,000 to have like a home computer that barely is more powerful than your calculator today. Not that we even have calculators anymore.
What is
But
that?
you know, but a lot of times when new technology comes to market, it tends to go to the enterprise place first. I think that AI, because it's SaaS based, at least initially, and we can talk about robots later if you want. But because initially it's SaaS based, I think that there's a massive opportunity for us to leverage and find ways in the SMB industry to leverage this technology better and even faster than what larger organizations can do. There's a lot of predictions, and it's coming out of the pandemic that says SMB business, is larger than it's ever been before because people just started their own smaller businesses,
Mm,
and they can do business globally, and they can scale their businesses without hiring new people, all because of technology. The MSP can and should be kind of the center of all these things. So let's leverage the flexibility that we have within the SMB market, within the open-mindedness that don't hire an employee, leverage this SaaS platform for a fraction of the cost. Instead, I think there's an opportunity for SMB to lead the way on technology innovation. Um, I do think that the sustainability conversation is something that we need to think about.
mm,
I did throw up a couple of objections as to why those things are there, but I think it's still something we need to think about, because I think that uh, it's going to be a conversation at some point in time, and again, it's part of the buying process. If I have an apple here and an apple here, and both of them are exactly the same, but one of them is more environmentally sustainable than the other one, I'm going to choose that
mm.
at right now as a differentiator. But if the other one's double the cost, or something along those lines, you're not necessarily, or most people aren't necessarily going to make that decision. So I think that we need to think along those lines. I don't think we need to do anything radical at this particular point, but I think we need to start thinking along those lines, because I think that that might become something that is part of the conversation that I don't think is part of it today.
Mhm.
We tend to put things in a garbage can and then it wishes it away. Like it's not my problem because I can't see it. But at some point in time, we are going to have to think about that. In cybersecurity, I was shocked. I was in Calgary doing a meeting not that long ago. I want to say within the last 3 months ago. I had 35 MSPs, very good MSPs, in a room. And the question was posed of how many of them have a presentable document that they can go to their end users and demonstrate a cybersecurity plan or
Mm.
an AI plan, and none of them had one. There was one guy in the room that didn't want to admit it because he looked around the room and saw that nobody else had, and he didn't want to put his hand up because he didn't
That
want
guy.
everybody coming to him saying, "Can you give that to me?" I think
Mhm.
that having an actual document that outlines the actual plan of where everything is going from a cybersecurity AI um, process, I think is going to be critical. And I think that, again, goes back to what I was talking about. We can lead the charge in this area of technology, um, early adoption, and then also having a plan, a rollout plan, or at least getting people thinking about it. I think would be immensely beneficial to our place. Um, Embracing AI and being the subject matter experts on AI, I think is going to be something that we need to be doing, so that when we are having those dinner conversations, when we are out at parties and stuff, and somebody mentions something about AI, and if we have some more information about it, I think that's going to go a long way to helping our businesses and helping you within your own community. Doing lunch and learn specifically around AI, I think are going to be massive because there's still a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. And this is going to evolve very, very quickly. So I think the more knowledge that we have now, the more benefit that we're going to have longer term. I think that, it's funny. I was watching or listening to a podcast. I have a really hard time with this podcast because the individual that does it is very, very young. I'm talking like in their teens, but they are talking about what the next social media platform is, because we're talking about the death of TikTok.
Mm.
Where and I stopped adopting social media platforms back when I think Instagram was kind of the last social media platform that I've got. I'd never had Snapchat, never had TikTok definitely probably will not have whatever is next. But thinking about those things, like what is next? Why invest all of your money into what's now? Think about what is next. And it's interesting, some interesting conversations about some of the things that TikTok, as an example, did in the social media realms. Um, the next platform that is going to be the next TikTok is going to be doing even more of those types of things, making people and giving people the ability to do even more things from an editing, producing, that kind of situation. So I think in our space, we have to continually look at what's next, or just again, no investments other than time and just kind of understanding. Like we're talking about AI right now. What's next? What's
Mhm.
after AI? And there's some interesting stuff that's being chatted about there. But that's maybe 5, 6, 7 years out. And hopefully a lot of us have retirement plans where we can get out of this space before then. But if not, let's at least start staying relevant and making some of those predictions ourselves. And then finally, I think, and I mentioned it before, getting away from being a solution provider and more into a strategic advisor. You should be in the planning meetings, you should be in the budgeting meetings. And these are old conversations that we've had in the managed services space. None of this is revolutionary or, oh, I hadn't thought about that. So I think just being relevant and continuing to stay relevant and open-minded and being involved, I think are all going to be really critical things to the future of the managed services space. But we all have the skills to be able to do it. It's just a matter of whether we turn that skill on. But less solution provider, more strategic advisor.
Some solid advice there, my friend. Look, I mean, the one thing that I always will tell, this is the thing that I study and spend a lot of time with all the smart people trying to figure out like what's next. And the one thing that I'm always when an MSP comes to me and says, Julian, I'm not quite sure about this or that, whatever it is, I always ask them just one question. Do you engage with your vendors and your the distributors and the folks like yourselves and so on? Do you talk with these people at all? Ask them. They have the information. All right, they can help you get along. Like you don't have to invent this stuff. It's already been done, right? I mean, you guys have got tons of data about what a successful MSP looks like, what they're selling, and I know your marketplace solution is taking it to the next level in sort of suggesting what other things they should be selling to their customers based upon here's what other folks are doing. So the actual advice and the support is there. They just gotta ask for it. What are you guys doing at maybe we'll just wrap it up here with Pax8. I know you guys are, calling yourselves a marketplace, then a distributor. What exactly do you think you're going to do to help them fuel their future growth from
Well,
Pax8?
I mean, that's it, right? So we're in the technology industry, and in the technology industry, there needs to be innovation. Disties don't innovate. Disties sell other people's crap.
Mm.
And that is not what we are doing. It's not the future of where not only our organization, but our entire industry is going. And it's been part of this conversation, Julian, where, the way in which people are consuming things is changing. So the way in which Disty acts needs to change as well, which is why we are not a Disty, we're a marketplace. Because marketplaces, and if you think about the ways in which we consume anything in our lives, those are starting to change. We are starting to go to marketplaces like Angie's List, like Mercari, like Carvana, like Amazon,
Mm.
in order to consume things that we traditionally have done in different ways. The IT is no different, and IT is going to continue to evolve in that direction, especially as more and more SaaS, especially as we see more and more enterprise companies that are interested in selling to SMBs. So the idea is, how do we keep the managed service provider at the center of everything? And it needs to be through a marketplace where the MSPs are the ones that are driving the actual marketplace. And when we talk about technology innovation, I challenge you, talk to any of the traditional disties out there. What are they
Mm.
doing? What's their roadmap look like? Do they
Mm.
even have a technology roadmap? Of course not. They're just looking at putting other people's technology on there. That's their roadmap. For us, it's developing a platform that actually helps our partners innovate the way in which they are consuming things and giving the ability to their end users to consume things. And if you think about what AI could do with, if I gave you all the data that you could possibly want about your end user, and you could throw it into an AI platform to make better recommendations on what products they should be selling, how much you should be charging for them, what are the gaps, what are the holes, what other technologies are coming to market that you haven't even thought of yet. Those whole things. Like if we can automate that entire thing, and if you could automate that entire thing for your end user, you'd have a better experience. You'd be going to where they are as far as the way in which they want to consume things. And that might be a traditional way, it might be a new way. But more importantly, this whole idea about being the strategic advisor, being the person that's actually out there making recommendations before they need to even think about it, that's where the value out of any of our relationships comes from, is our knowledge and information, our education. And that's where, that's where the reliability on the MSP comes from. So, what we're doing specifically at Pax8 is we're just leveraging that technology to give the MSP that ability.
Mm.
Nobody else is doing that. That's not what, people joke around that, we're just trying to change the word disty to marketplace. That's not it. This is a completely different beast that
Mm.
we're actually talking
Yeah, I
about,
mean, you're
and it's
moving to where the
leveraging
puck is going,
technology.
right? At the end of the day, right? If we are just doing the same thing, then what's the difference? There's no
Mhm.
differentiation, right? It's just what's your value. You guys are doing some really amazing stuff. I was able to take a peek at the technology, what you guys are doing, and you actually showcase it. I mean, if anybody wants to, check it all out, right? Just sign up and boom, started, right? I think you got some events coming up. Your Beyond events in 2025. You got the dates for those yet?
Yeah, that's June 9th in Denver, Colorado. So that's Beyond. This is our going to be our third flagship event. Beyond started in 2023.
Yeah.
So this will be our third one, 23, 24, yeah, 25, our third one. We should have about 2,300 MSPs there, which is up from about 1,500 from last year. So
Mm.
there should be all in all probably about 3,500 people in the Gaylord in Denver. So very excited about that. It's becoming one of the largest events within the MSP space. And part of the reason why I love it is because we are a marketplace for all these different
Mm.
technologies right now, about 140 different technologies. Because we're a marketplace for them, it's not like I'm standing on stage pushing any of
Mm.
my products or any of the, these specific products. We still have the ability of choice. So it's a great place to come to be able to go and look at all the different technologies that are out there, including ones that aren't even on our marketplace. You want to talk about innovative technologies that nobody has seen. That's where you're going to find some of those things specific to the managed services space. And then, of course, we started last year, we did our first event in Europe, Beyond in Berlin
Mm.
in October of 2024. We had 500 MSPs, probably about 1,100 people total in Berlin. What a phenomenal event. The energy was just amazing the entire time. We're doing that again. So that's going to be in October of 2025. So June is going to be in Denver in 2025, June 9th, or October, I want to say 13th. I might be wrong on that. Don't hold me against that. It's going to be in
Mm.
Amsterdam for Europe. And then we'll continue to see where this all goes.
Keep up the great work, my friend. Look, at the end of the day, right? Size of events are one thing, but I think it's what's the quality of the
Oh,
event more
100%.
important. It's what you learn, and I mean, I've learned that the number one thing at events are pretty much, the peer-to-peer communications and so on, and it's quite phenomenal what you learn. So, MSPs need to go out there and learn, and
Mhm.
the best way to learn is to attend events, learn from vendors, pick up the phone, ask Rob and the team like what's going on. There's a lot of data floating around, and if you ask, you'll be surprised what you get.
Yeah.
That's it for me, man. Last word goes to you, Rob. What do you want everybody to know?
Nothing. I'm excited about 2025. I think 2025 is going to be an absolutely incredible year for managed service providers. I think we're going to continue to see growth within everything that we're actually doing globally, and all the things that we've been talking about as far as bringing this community together, making our lives easier, making our lives better. It's still going to be a lot of work, but I'm very, very bullish on where we're all heading, and I'm excited. I'm very excited for the next 12 months.
Me too, Rob. Take care. We'll see you around, and look forward to seeing you at the next event, whenever that may be. Cheers.
Thanks, Julian.
Cheers.